Um, it is obvious to all that government has a spending problem and they have overtaxed and piled on fees to an unlivable extent. What is your plan?
Well, I guess first off, with a lot of these questions, the hard thing is I'm just one person, right? So it is just my plan. It's not like I'm going to be able to initiate and make something happen. But the real thing is looking at all these situations, and it's really not one, right? The budget's not one issue. There's a bunch of issues, right? The spending is one issue, the taxing is another, and the way that they want to keep approaching stuff. So looking at the spending that we keep doing with the roads, right? We're seeing all the stuff with the bike lanes being put in. That money's coming from other sources as well, right? It's not directly from us. We're getting that from state funding. We need to be looking at that not as just magic money that's coming from an outside source, but as our money, right? We have to be fiscally responsible with that money. So not just, oh, we need to put bike lanes in because they're giving us money, so let's just put them in. That has to be looked at, and we have to be planning all of these things together. So we've been doing a little bit of that with the Pure Water Project, and we're going to go back after Pure Water Project, and we're going to go ahead and repave the roads. Honestly, that's probably one of the smartest things I've seen the city do in a long time. I think most of us that lived around here have been used to seeing one utility company come through, tear up the road. 6 months later, they come back and they do the same thing. So finally seeing roads getting paved is great, but the way in which we're tagging everything together and then trying to just snowball it isn't really working. So we need to be looking at these programs a little bit better and then engaging with the people, right? Is this really what you want? Is this really the best way it's going to be spent? Spending money, I mean, that's the big thing, right? Spending your money. How are you spending it? Whether it's directly from our general fund or if it's coming from outside sources, from grants or things like that. Once we figure out how we can spend our money better, then we can figure out how we're going to be generating this revenue better. Trying to go, okay, well, we're just going to spend money, and then go, well, now we need to generate revenue here. That's not really going to work out. So then we need to tie that back in together and figure out, well, if we have projects that we need to do, priority projects, infrastructure is one. That's probably the biggest one that we need to be dealing with. Well, how do we do that? If we need new capital projects we got to be doing, where's that money coming from? Not we're going to spend it and then now we're going to go, hey, guess what? We're going to put in parking meters on the side of the road or at the parks to then pay for paving this area. That doesn't make sense. So if we're going to be doing new projects, the funding has to be there first. We need to be going back down to what our core issues are. What's our core responsibilities, right? Paving the roads, keeping the street lights on, paying for the fire department, paying for the police department. We need to be working on those first before we start getting on all these niceties. And all these niceties we've kind of confused everything with these nicety projects. And then now it's where do we get all this money? And that's this grabbing. And we're seeing the city grab everywhere for a dime. And we're starting to see that grabbing a dime isn't working. We're getting pennies. So there's a lot of that needs to be really looked at. The continual overestimating what the city is going to be getting in revenue from whatever source it's going to be is a constant problem. The city is constantly saying, hey, we're going to get this much revenue from this tax or this fee or whatever. And we're not getting that. It's constantly, we're getting lower than we're supposed to. And then on the same token, the other side's saying, hey, guess what? This is what it's going to cost to do this project. This is what it's going to cost to hire these employees or to, whatever it is. Those are not coming out on budget. Things are always more expensive or we're getting less, right? In order to keep it on budget, we have to come down with less expectations. So we need to be really adjusting that. Our expectations need to be realistic. And I think that's a big problem right now is our expectations are not realistic.
Okay. Will you support Proposition 13 taxpayer protections?
Yes. Actually, I was out getting signatures for the Save Prop 13 ballot initiative. I believe that's really important. I think the idea that we're just going to tax people wherever we can is just ridiculous.
Will you support Proposition 13 taxpayer protections?
Yes. Actually, I was out getting signatures for the Save Prop 13 ballot initiative. I believe that's really important. I think the idea that we're just going to tax people wherever we can is just ridiculous.
Would you move public employees to a 401k and eliminate public pensions? If not, how would you address the city employee pension deficit?
I believe that's really important. As voters, we voted to already do that once already. And a lot of people right now are confused because they believe, hey, we passed that ballot initiative and think that everybody's supposed to be going to 401k. They're not aware of the 2021 court case that reverted things back and the situation we're in. I think that's another non-transparent issue. The transparency between the government and hiding things. I really believe we need to go to a 401k system that's more sustainable.
Will you reduce city staffing, especially senior managers?
Yes. Honestly, I think the city government should be aligned with what is needed. And if things need to be adjusted, things need to be adjusted. If you need experts in a field in order to get certain things done, then you need experts in that field, right? If you need people to push it through, in the construction field, if you need more guys to shovel, then you need more guys to shovel. If you need an engineer to design the plans, you need an engineer to design the plans. If you have too many engineers in the office, not enough guys shoveling, guess what? Stuff doesn't happen. We got to align. And I do agree with some of the other candidates and the belief that we should be outsourcing when necessary. There's times when projects can be done a lot more efficient by hiring a company to do it, especially to knock out special projects instead of hiring specific employees that are only going to be used for a short time.
Would you support changing the way city residents have been asked to pay for trash pickup, such as changing it to a private trash company rather than a city-run business on our property taxes?
So, I liked it the way it was before, like a lot of my neighbors. I'm very disappointed in the way it was rolled out and the lies that were told to everybody. It was lies. It wasn't myths, truths, or anything like that. They lied to everyone. And I think the voters should be given the option. I think we need to be honest about it. And if people go, hey, this is what it's going to cost, and we can't sustain it on a city-run thing, then we should be looking for outside vendors. And it should be up to the people, not a couple of people in a back room making decisions and then telling us what's better for us.
Where do you stand on sanctuary cities?
So I've been getting a lot of questions about not directly sanctuary cities, but also just MAGA support, pro, against. Basically, here's the big problem we have in our city government is we're getting too confused with outside issues. The sanctuary cities, anything that isn't directly in the city purview, I don't think the city should be involved. The state has already come up with rules. The state has said things that we have to comply with. Then we have to comply with those rules. The federal government has the federal government rules. We're getting too confused on all of these other issues, which are important to people. I'm not saying they're not important, but on the city level, that's interfering with getting involved with, paving our roads, making sure that our fire department's able to show up and our police department's able to show up. So when we start convoluting the issues with national issues, or even to a certain extent, state issues, it's taking away from our local politics. And I think that shouldn't be a discussion at all on the city level.
But is it because there's sanctuary states and then there's sanctuary cities? So are they?
I believe that there shouldn't be sanctuary cities. I believe the city should stay out of it. It shouldn't be pro or against at that point. I think it's you end up wasting more city resources in something that we really shouldn't be dealing with at that point.
If you had to drop out of the race and had to select another candidate to support, who would it be?
So at this point in time, it would probably be Richard Bailey. He's coming out with the main issues that I'm worried about and a lot of other people are worried about, and he has solutions. I haven't heard any solutions from any of the other candidates except to tax people more. And I can't agree with that.
What is your view on affordable housing that's not really affordable and ADUs everywhere without infrastructure planning?
It's ridiculous. Basically, it goes with all the other things where you're lying to people. You're telling them one thing and the truths aren't there, right? So it's just like with the garbage where we're going to say it's going to be one price and it's not. We're saying things are going to be affordable. They're not affordable. It's not really helping. And we're seeing that issue across the city where we don't have the resources where we need the resources, right? We're not seeing the fire department, getting stations where they need to have stations, right? Or equipment where they need to have equipment. So when you start adding in this density, whether it's with big high rises, bigger apartment buildings that we're going to be getting here in Clairemont, or what they want to do down there in the Midway area, there's no infrastructure coming in. And without that infrastructure, what are we doing here? Clairemont was a planned community. When the developers developed Clairemont, they put in the infrastructure. We have the sewer lines to handle the capacity that we were supposed to have. We have the roads that we were supposed to have, to handle that capacity. So when you start adding in that stuff, some of these ADUs that we're seeing in some of the cul-de-sacs, we're not able to get fire trucks in there. You're putting in 17 units in the back. How many trucks is it going to take to get there? If you look at what our current deployment is, there's multiple engines that show up to a single house fire. So now you have 17 units in the back. How are they going to get there? How are they going to get the water there? How is the ambulance that's going to take that person with smoke inhalation or burns able to get to that patient and get them out? None of that plan is in there.
What will you do to support transparent community input with real influence and not just symbolic hearings?
Well, I don't know who all has been down to the city hall to see the meetings down at City Hall. I kind of look at a lot of that as performative art. Biggest thing is trying to draw people in. So having a hearing down at City Hall is one thing. Having some of the meetings that we have, with the planning group here in Clairemont, we have a very good planning group that's been really involved in trying to bring people out. Problem is getting people aware. So I think outreach is the biggest thing, and actually engaging with people. People are willing to talk if you give them a chance. It's just going to be trying to get people to show up.
Will you scale back or cancel Pure Water Phase 2?
I think that's something we really need to look at. There is a lot of budget issues of where money's coming from and how it's been allocated. And so we have to be careful. When you have money allocated potentially from outside sources, grants, things like that, we have to spend it in a certain way or we lose it. So if it's already been half spent, we need to make sure that we're efficient in how we're doing stuff, so we're not wasting money. But that program is a waste of money. It was sold on the idea. When I was a kid, I remember when it was first coming out. And, when I was in junior high, one of my science teachers was one of the biologists. And, we're discussing how this is all going to work. And it's a great idea. I'm not against pure water projects in the concept of it, but it's costing us too much money. We've been really good about saving water. So now it's starting to cost us because we're so good at saving water. And it needs to be scaled back. It's going to be really looking at that. That's a project I'm not in on the numbers on that one. I would like to see it, just stop and save money and stop a lot of the ridiculousness, but that's going to be a complicated one.
Mm-hmm. Campaigns require money and large donors want some sort of quid pro quo. How will you handle this? It's probably the issue with the biggest impact on how the city is currently run, with developers, unions, and special interests.
So direct campaign contributions to the candidates, we can only accept $800 per person per campaign. We have two campaigns, right? We have the primary and the general election. So we can get up to $1,600 per person. We can't accept it from businesses or entities like that. That said, there can be PACs set up by outside groups. A I'll tell you right now, for me, I need more people to start donating to me in order for me to have that problem. Uh, I'm fine with not actually getting donations. It was asked at a question at a forum not too long ago, and my largest campaign contribution, I don't know who the person actually was. I met them one time at a meeting, and we were hanging out kind of at a dinner event. And next morning, I had a contribution. They're from somebody that lives outside of San Diego. I've never had any contact with them other than that event. We just had a good conversation. That's how I handle it. I don't expect anything from people. If people want to give me money to help out the campaign, appreciate it. If they want to volunteer their time, I appreciate that even more. But you're going to get what you get from me. After 20 years of working at sea and working with my crew, I don't really cater to people. You can ask my crew. You get what you get. And, if you want to help out. If you want something special, you can give me $1,600. We can put it in the campaign, but I'm going to give you what I'm going to give you.
Why are we still subsidizing the San Diego Zoo with our property taxes? Would you support removing that tax, as the zoo is very profitable and no longer needs support?
So the zoo is also a funny creature. I don't think most people know that the zoo actually doesn't own any of the animals. The San Diego Zoo, all the animals are owned actually by the city of San Diego. So there is always going to be a relationship. Now, can we find ways to reduce our contributions? Yeah. I kind of figured that I was okay with it when we had free parking. We're helping to pay for stuff and deal with stuff. I got free parking out of the deal. I like that. I like the zoo. I don't know the exact numbers on how much is being contributed and what's going on there. But it's not a complete independent entity. I'm aware of that.
People are realizing green policies have increased the cost of living considerably. Now that people like Gates admit we're not facing an existential crisis and new reports prove the models were wrong, will you support rolling back green spending?
Yes. It's spending in general, right? It needs to be smart. If you're not getting a benefit out of it, then what are you doing? Now, here in Clairemont, the city did green spending years ago, right? They bought the Tecolote Canyons. That's green spending. That was great. That's long-lasting benefit we're seeing. A lot of these other projects that we're seeing, they're not long-lasting. A lot of this spending, we're seeing in renewable energy, things like that, it's not sustainable and it's not really green. So we really need to be realigning our goals and our expectations. And I'm for rolling it back. I like nature. I want to have it around. I mean, we live in San Diego. It's beautiful. I want to keep it beautiful, but we need to be realistic about what we're actually wasting money on. Not just spending, but what I'm saying is waste in a lot of places.
What are your thoughts on how we as a community can address the homeless population?
That's a fun one. So the homeless situation is gotten out of control for a whole lot of reasons. Lack of enforcement of our rules is kind of been one of the biggest ones. And then this continually spending money. Sorry, got a bus passing by.
Oh, I didn't hear it.
Oh,
I can't hear it.
Okay. So the continual spending of money for programs that aren't working. And it's not just that they're not working for us, they're not working for the homeless that they're supposed to be helping. And we need to be honest about, this honesty. We got to be honest about what our expectations are and what we're actually getting out of it. And we're constantly seeing money being spent on programs, shelters, and people aren't really being helped. I was laughing and crying during the mayor's State of the City address, and he's showing pictures of highway off ramps and on ramps in which encampments were removed. And literally the day before that video, I was watching it. I drove right past these same on-ramps and saw the encampments. And since then, I've been driving past and they're still there. Mm-hmm. So removing them for photo ops is ridiculous. You know, how much money are we spending actually kicking people off the street for a one-day thing? We're not helping them. We're not giving them any sort of chance to get back. And I don't think that all of it is the city's responsibility or even the county's responsibility. There is nonprofits that are come out and they have some really good ideas. And I think we need to be integrating all of that together. Having one program here, one program over here doesn't really work. You know, if we get 5 programs going and they can work together, then people have that chance and that safety net. So that if you have somebody with mental health issues, you have somebody with drug issues, you're not going to get them off the street one time into a shelter and get them rehabilitated. That's ridiculous. You know, you take 100 people, you might get a couple people that'll get into the program. And of those couple people, maybe only 1 or 2 actually are able to complete the program on the first go round. So we need to have ways that we're looking at this as potentially revolving doors for the help. And that's where we're going to need that public-private partnership and really make things work. There's a couple of other programs I've seen. There's a program that I'd like to see come out called Sunbreak Ranch. It's got some really good ideas and it's new. It's different than what we've been doing. And what I can tell you is what we've been doing is not working. And I'm ready for new ideas.
What are your thoughts and plans regarding the proliferation of bike lanes?
So the city in general, I'd say was pretty good at doing this, and they've caused that 2 camps, right? Pro bike lane, anti bike lane. And most people are like me, they're not anti bike lane. We just don't like the way they've been implemented. And there's other ways to do it that are going to make it more effective. Now, taking out street parking in certain neighborhoods may be beneficial. You know, there's certain places where that maybe more people are riding and that off-street parking is going to be more prevalent or a bigger necessity for, developments. You know, if you're building in, high rises, you're not going to be using as much street parking. Having bike lanes take over or making paths similar to like the boardwalk to where you have bike walk paths. There's areas where that's going to work, but a blanket, this is going to fit across the whole city. This is what we're going to do is ridiculous. Not every community is the same. Not every community do people live and work in that neighborhood. The joke is, I live in Clairemont where it's all hills. Yeah. I grew up here. Yeah, we rode bikes, but no, we're not riding bikes everywhere. I have a family. We have kids. We're not riding to the grocery store to get our groceries. It's just, that's not the way it works. We have to travel. The average person in San Diego, I believe, commutes around a little over 20 miles a day. We're not commuting 20 miles a day on a bicycle. So we need to look at better ways to do that. Taking out things on the main routes, those main arteries need to be there so that people can move. And not just for their regular daily traffic, but also for evacuating. We have fires. We had them over here in Clairemont just, last year where we had the canyon catch on fire. If people need to evacuate, how do they evacuate? You go up to UC where they want to do that same thing over on Governor Drive. Where are they going to evacuate? Everybody's going to get in a traffic jam. How do the fire resources get in if everybody stopped on the side of the road? We saw this in the Palisades fire, but just recently it was witnessed over on the 805 freeway when that's a semi truck crashed and people were stuck in that space between the 163 trying to get off, and numerous cars were pulled off to the side of the road. People just parked their cars and walked and got an Uber so they can get to work and come back and pick their cars up later. This is the reality. We need to be looking at that. We're not all moving to bicycles, and public transportation is not there. So we need to be honest about it. Putting in bike lanes, yes, let's do it when we can afford it, and where it's feasible. Is there ways to put them on side streets or other places? That needs to be brought up, not just in a city meeting with planners, but also with the planning groups and the neighbors. They need to be involved in what's going on. Otherwise, we're going to run into things like we ran into up in Mira Mesa where the city comes out, restripes the road, puts in a ridiculous center lane that people don't know how to use, and then they have to come back and restripe it. How much does that cost us to change back? That, we really need to be looking at this stuff and planning things out a lot better.
Or do you support keeping the 30-foot height limit along the coast, especially in the area that was affected by the 2020 Measure C?
Yes, I do. I'm not opposed to specific areas and things changing on a case-by-case basis. Nothing's ever going to stay the same. I'm aware of that. I tell people, like here in Clairemont, we're a 30-foot height limit. But when my mom was a kid and my family had a farm down in Bay Park, there was no Clairemont. So things change. I get they change. I may like my neighborhood a lot. I may love my neighborhood. That's the reason why I'm still here and raising my family here. I don't want it to change drastically, but it's going to change. Just like at the local shopping center, you're going to have different stores come in and go. That's going to happen in our development, but it needs to be organic. And we need to be involved in that. So if there's certain areas in which we need a bigger building and the city or the neighborhood decides, yeah, this is okay, then it should be approved on a case by case basis. But blanketly, going with like SB 79 and we're going to just raise the height limits and the locals have no control over what's happening in their neighborhood. I am just completely opposed to that.
Will you prioritize critical public safety, fire, police, brush clearing, and infrastructure, water, sewer, roads, storm drain spending in the budget?
Yes. Part of the charters we have to, but that's the core responsibilities of the city government. It's kind of necessary. From my background, I spent a lot of time in emergency management on board ships running emergency response vessels. That is a very priority thing for me. That's the way I think. I'm a very self-reliant person, but we need to be looking at those things. We have a lot of unfunded infrastructure needs, but the emergency infrastructure is very important. If we don't have the fire department showing up, then how are they going to put the fire out? If we don't have the water there for the fire department to put the fire out, how are they going to do their job? So yes, that needs to be prioritized.
What is your stance on short-term vacation rentals and vacancy tax?
So start with vacancy tax. Oppose it. I'm opposed to government taxing people every chance they can get. If people are paying property tax, they're paying property tax. Just because you are not renting it out, that there's a whole lot of other issues too on a state level that keeps people from wanting to rent properties. It becomes very expensive, especially for the person that owns one house. So I believe the government should stay out of that. And for the short-term vacation rentals, at this time, I don't see an issue. Now, could there be an issue? Could it become ridiculous? Yes, it can. We already have a program that we've initiated to restrict the number of units that are available. And as far as I know, that has not been maxed out. So that's not really a problem. Now, the case-by-case basis of problems because of rentals, that's different. If there's an issue because we have people that are renting out certain properties and are a constant nuisance to the public, then that can be dealt with. And that's not necessarily a systemic problem of the short-term rentals. That's the same thing we have anywhere with just bad people doing bad things. If that same unit is the same problem, just like a house that's got bad renters and a constant problem, or a business that's constantly dealing with gang members, we have laws and we have ways to deal with that. And we just need to be enforcing those rules.
That's it. You made it to the end.
Sweet.
Anything else you want to add?
I hope that really we can get more people involved. That's the biggest thing is, if people can get involved and come out and show up, just like showing up to vote for the planning group or to get on the planning group, but showing up to the meetings just to know what's going on.
Yeah.
If you know what's going on, if you're informed, I get it. And if I can help somebody, if somebody can reach out to me to get information on something and be more informed, then I feel like I was successful in helping my neighbors.